On my 18th birthday, my grandpa gave me a gift that felt like a dream come true. A significant amount of money to invest in my business. Ever since I was young, I dreamed of starting a custom stationery and office supplies business. I wanted to create personalized planners, branded office kits, and affordable customized products for small companies. The idea really took shape back in 2020 when I had more time on my hands and started experimenting with graphic design and stationery. I even ran a small online shop, but I wanted to grow it into something sustainable, something I could live off. I had everything planned out. A clear vision, reliable suppliers, and sample designs ready to go. Grandpa's generous gift was the final push I needed to make it happen. But my excitement didn't last long. Around that time, my older brother, who was 31, had been unemployed for nearly 2 years. He jumped from one job to another, but nothing ever stuck because he just couldn't follow the rules. He'd sleep in, skip work without telling anyone, and had even dropped out of college. It seemed like he never got his act together, floating from one poor decision to the next. My parents were constantly bailing him out, covering his bills, buying him whatever he needed, and letting him live with them rent-free. He was 26 when this pattern started, and even now it felt like he was just coasting through life without a care. My parents would brush it off, saying he was just in a rough patch and would eventually turn things around. But that rough patch had been dragging on since he was 16. I'd watched it for years, and it was frustrating to see him blow every opportunity while my parents enabled him. When my parents found out about the money Grandpa gave me, everything changed. Suddenly, they were all over me, pressuring me to loan the entire amount to my brother. They claimed he was struggling to pay his bills and needed the money to avoid eviction. Every time I said no, they'd guilt-trip me, calling me selfish and saying I owed it to him because family helps family. Eventually, the guilt got to me. I gave in, not because I thought it was right, but because I just couldn't handle the constant pressure. I told myself he'd pay me back soon, and I'd still have time to launch my business. The next morning, I woke up hoping I'd done something good by helping him. But before I could even process what had happened, my parents hit me with another demand. They told me that now that I was 18, I needed to start paying $2,000 a month in rent. I was still in school, didn't have a job, and had just handed over my entire startup fund to my brother, but none of that mattered to them. It felt like I was being punished for doing exactly what they'd wanted. That's when it finally hit me. They didn't care about me or my dreams. To them, I was just a solution to my brother's endless problems. I felt completely used, like my goals and aspirations didn't even register on their radar. That week, I packed my things and left. I knew I couldn't keep living in a situation where I was just a backup plan for everyone else. I cut off all contact with my parents and brother that day, and decided to focus on building a life for myself. The next few years were hard. I worked multiple jobs while slowly building my business and attending college. I poured all my energy into designing logos, creating custom planners, and partnering with small businesses that needed my products. By the second year, my efforts started paying off, and I even managed to open a small store. By the 5th year, my business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I had 2 locations up and running, and my online presence was thriving. Then, completely out of the blue, my parents reached out. I hadn't spoken to them in years, so seeing their names pop up was jarring. At first, they were vague about why they wanted to talk, but it didn't take long for the real reason to come out. My brother apparently was in serious trouble. They wouldn't tell me exactly what was going on, but from what they said, it sounded like his life had spiraled completely out of control. They mentioned gambling debts, another failed business attempt, and even hinted that he might have been involved in something illegal. It wasn't just about money, though. They wanted me to use my business connections to help him out, find him a job, or somehow get him out of the mess he'd created. To sweeten the deal, they even offered to pay me back double the amount I had loaned him all those years ago. Something they'd never done before. I was floored. After everything they put me through, they had the audacity to come crawling back, not to apologize or reconnect, but to fix my brother's problems again. They hadn't reached out to congratulate me on my success, ask how I was doing, or show any interest in my life. The only reason they contacted me now was because they needed something. It was like nothing had changed. My brother was still their priority, and I was still the one expected to clean up his messes. I thought about it. I really did. The truth is, with the connections I've built in my industry, I probably could have found him some kind of opportunity. But the more I considered it, the angrier I got. My brother had never once tried to make things right with me. He'd never acknowledged the fact that he essentially stole from me, and now he didn't even have the decency to come to me himself. Instead, he sent our parents to do his bidding. Helping him would have meant lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. They hadn't changed. They still saw me as a solution to my brother's failures, not as my own person. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their dysfunction. So I told them no. I said I wasn't going to sacrifice what I'd worked so hard to build just to bail my brother out again. He made his choices, and it wasn't my job to fix them. They tried the same guilt-tripping tactics they'd always used, throwing around phrases like, "family helps family," and pointing out that I was in a good place now so I could afford to help. But I stood my ground. I've worked too hard to let them pull me back into their chaos. I don't owe them anything, not after the way they treated me. It's been a week since that conversation, and I haven't heard from them since. At first, I felt confident in my decision, but as time passes, doubt has started creeping in. Part of me feels guilty for not helping. He's still my brother after all. And even though I know it's not my responsibility, it's hard to shake the feeling that maybe I should have done something. I've been going back and forth in my head, trying to convince myself I made the right choice. But the guilt keeps eating away at me. Did I do the right thing? Or am I just letting bitterness cloud my judgment? Update. It's been 3 weeks since I first posted, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on everything. I also wanted to thank everyone for their responses. Whether you agreed with me or not, your perspectives helped me think things through. I noticed a lot of people had questions about the situation, so I'll try to address them before diving into what's happened since. Some of you asked if my parents specifically asked for money. No, they didn't come right out and ask for cash. What they wanted was for me to use my business connections to help my brother. From what I've pieced together, his problems go way beyond money. My parents were pretty vague, but it sounds like he's gotten himself into debt so massive that throwing cash at the issue won't solve it. They think that because I've built a network in the business world, I could somehow pull strings and get him out of trouble. Honestly, I know their request was just another way to drag me back into my brother's chaos. Some of you asked if I ever felt guilty about cutting ties with my family years ago or if I missed my brother. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't tough at first. For a long time, I felt guilty, questioning whether I was a terrible person for walking away. But over time, I realized that staying in contact would have only enabled their behavior. And as for missing my brother? No, not really. Our relationship had always been one-sided, me giving, him taking. A lot of you also wondered why I gave him the money in the first place. I'll admit, looking back, it was a naive decision. But I was only 18 at the time, still in high school, and living under my parents' roof. From the moment they found out about Grandpa's gift, though I still have no idea how they even knew about it, they never let up. Morning to night, they pressured me, guilt-tripped me, and used every tactic they could to make me feel terrible for not helping him. Eventually, I caved. I kept a small portion of the money, but most of it went to my brother. They made sure I felt like I had no other choice. Now on to what's happened recently. After my parents reached out asking for help, they went radio silent for about a week. I assumed they'd given up and found someone else to bail out my brother. But then out of nowhere, they invited me to dinner to talk things through. I debated whether I should go. Part of me thought it might give me closure to face them in person, but I also knew it could just be another round of manipulation. In the end, I decided to go, not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to see if they truly changed. Spoiler, they haven't. The dinner was at a local restaurant, which was unusual since my parents almost always insisted on hosting things at home. When I arrived, they were already seated and seemed oddly cheerful to see me. The whole vibe felt staged, like they were trying way too hard to act normal. First, it was civil enough. We exchanged polite small talk, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe they were genuinely trying to reconnect without any hidden agenda. But that hope didn't last long. Halfway through dinner, the real reason I was invited came out. They weren't asking for money this time, but they wanted me to use my business connections to help my brother. They said that since I worked with investors and people in the financial world, I could make a few introductions to help straighten things out for him. While it wasn't a direct cash grab, it was still a favor I had zero interest in doing. And just like that, I felt the same sinking feeling I had years ago when they pressured me into giving up Grandpa's gift. Things took an even worse turn when my brother showed up unexpectedly. My parents never mentioned that he'd be joining us. He waltzed in like he owned the place, wearing a smug grin, and sat down at the table as if everything was already handled. From the second he opened his mouth, it was clear he hadn't changed one bit. He was loud, arrogant, and completely unapologetic about the mess he'd created. It was almost laughable how entitled he acted. He didn't seem to see this as him asking for help. He acted like I owed him. He even suggested that since I was so successful with my business, it was only fair that I give him a hand. According to him, I should feel grateful for the chance to do something good for my family. To top it all off, he made a snide comment about how my business wouldn't have even succeeded if it weren't for the money I'd loaned him. The audacity left me speechless. How could you abandon your family when they need you the most? It felt like the entire family was ganging up on me, and none of them were actually interested in hearing my side of things. Not one of them offered to step in and help my brother themselves. They just wanted me to fix everything. First, I tried to respond calmly. I explained that I had already sacrificed for my brother in the past and that he squandered it. I told them I'd worked hard to build the life I have now, and that it wasn't fair to expect me to keep cleaning up his messes. Some people understood, but most of them just doubled down, saying things like, "You have more than enough, so why not share?" The pressure was overwhelming, and for a brief moment I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was being too harsh. But then I remembered everything my parents and brother had done. They lied to me, manipulated me, and took advantage of my kindness without ever showing any appreciation. I reminded myself that helping them now would only enable their behavior, and I couldn't allow that to happen again. So, I blocked my parents and extended family once more. This time I didn't feel guilty about it. I knew I had given them enough chances, and they had shown me time and time again that they wouldn't change. Since then, I've been focusing on myself and my business. Things are going great. I've expanded to 3 store locations and landed a few major clients that have helped my company grow even more. I'm proud of what I've built, and I refuse to let anyone drag me down again. As for my family, I've heard through the grapevine that my brother is still struggling, and that my parents are still enabling him. It's sad, but it's no longer my problem. I've learned that setting boundaries isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about teaching others how to treat you. And I've finally taught my family that I won't be their safety net anymore. I'm not sure what the future holds for my relationship with them, but for now, I'm at peace with my decision. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to protect yourself in your hard work. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally free. I've set just proves they haven't learned anything. They keep looking for someone else to clean up the mess instead of taking accountability for their choices. It's exhausting, and honestly, I'm at my limit. When I got the message from our relative, I sat with it for a while, debating whether I should respond. A part of me felt guilty for ignoring their plea for help, especially since things have gotten so bad. But then I thought about everything they've done, how they used me, manipulated me, and never once apologized for the pain they caused. It's clear they only reach out when they need something, and that's not the kind of relationship I can tolerate anymore. I decided not to reply. I blocked the relative who sent the message and made a note to reach out to my lawyer again, just to make sure my boundaries are legally secure. I'm not going to let them guilt me into backtracking on the progress I've made. It's taken years of hard work and therapy to get to where I am, and I won't let them drag me back into their toxic cycle. As for my brother, I can't even muster any sympathy for him at this point. He's always believed he could do whatever he wanted without facing any real consequences, and now he's finally seeing what happens when you live recklessly. If he ends up in jail, it'll be because of his own decisions, not because I didn't swoop in to save him. It's been a lot to process, and I'd be lying if I said it hasn't weighed on me. I never wanted things to end up like this, but I've come to realize that sometimes, no matter how much you care, you can't save people from themselves. My parents and brother made their choices, and now they have to live with them. For now, I'm focusing on my own life. My business continues to thrive, and I've started taking on new projects that excite me. I've also made some amazing friends who've been there for me through all of this, reminding me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who truly support you and want the best for you. I'm not sure if I'll ever reconcile with my family. Maybe one day they'll realize how much damage they've done and make a genuine effort to change. But I'm not holding my breath. I've spent too much of my life waiting for them to be the family I needed, and now it's time for me to be the person I need for myself. To anyone reading this who's dealing with toxic family dynamics, you're not alone, and it's okay to put yourself first. Setting boundaries isn't easy, but it's worth it for your peace of mind. You deserve to live a life free from guilt and manipulation. Thanks for reading, and thank you to everyone who's offered advice and support along the way. It's meant more to me than I can put into words. It's clear to me now that my parents and brother will never change, and I've accepted that reality. They've made their choices and I've made mine. The hardest part of all this has been sticking to my decision to stay out of their chaos. There's always that nagging little voice asking if I'm being too cold, too harsh, but every time I think about all they've done, and haven't done, it becomes clear that I'm making the right call. I've spent years trying to do the right thing by them only to be taken advantage of, dismissed, and used. None of my sacrifices ever made a difference because they didn't want to change. They just wanted someone to take on the consequences of their poor decisions. Helping them now would only drag me back into the same toxic cycle, where I'm nothing more than a backup plan for their mistakes. That's not a life I'm willing to live anymore. After hearing about their latest plea through a relative, I decided to cut off that contact as well. I know they probably had good intentions, but I can't allow anyone to try and guilt me into breaking the boundaries I've set. This is my life and I have to protect it, even if that means walking away completely. I've also done some digging into my brother's situation, and it's even worse than I thought. The fraud investigation is serious, and the authorities have been building a case against him for months. Whether or not he'll end up in jail isn't certain yet, but the possibility is very real. Honestly, I can't even feel sorry for him anymore. He's had so many chances to turn things around, but he's chosen to throw every single one away. It's hard to pity someone who refuses to help themselves. For now, my focus is on my own mental health and well-being. This entire experience has been emotionally draining, and I need to prioritize healing and moving forward. I'm finally in a place where I feel at peace with my decisions, and I'm not going to let guilt or pressure pull me back into a situation that's only ever caused me pain. This will likely be my final update, as I've decided to completely cut ties with everyone involved. I've done everything I could, and now it's time to let go and move on. To everyone who has supported me through this ordeal, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your encouragement has been a lifeline during one of the hardest chapters of my life. I'm looking ahead now, ready to live a life that's truly mine, free from guilt, manipulation, and toxic relationships.